My friends, good to be with you. Pull up a chair, pour a pint. We're going to talk about drinking tonight in the right way. Alcohol has been part of the human experience for a very, very long time. We actually have an enzyme, ADH4, that helps us to digest, but essentially is a poison, and developed that probably millions of years ago. See, when fruit fell to the ground, started to ferment, human beings were drawn to this beautiful smell and also the buzz it gave them that probably helped them cope with the stress of prehistoric life, which is not unlike the stress of trying to get your kids out the door to school every morning. And human civilization formed in a lot of ways around that fermentation process. There are some sociologists who argue that agricultural culture emerged not just because we needed food, but because we wanted to put the processes in place that would put a drink in our hands. And human beings have been fermenting alcohol and making their own alcohol 7,000 years before Christ we started doing that, which means 3,500 years before we had written words, we were making alcohol, which maybe is why we were relaxed so much and took us thousands of years to bother writing anything down. So this is a part of the human experience. And often when we talk about it, we talk about the dangers of alcohol, and they're very real. They can destroy your life. But there's also a lot of blessings to this part of the human experience. God obviously thinks so. The saints thought so. Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. The Last Supper, he takes the matter of wine for transubstantiation to himself. So here to talk to us about how to enjoy alcohol in the right way, the Catholic way, while we enjoy a pint ourselves, Jared Stout. Woohoo! I'm so excited to be with you, brother.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, and nomen est omen, right? Jared Stout, your name is destiny. And
it's
here
a nice
you
pun,
are.
yes.
Right? And what a perfect thing. He pointed this out before we started the cameras rolling. The beer option, his book, where can they get this, by the way?
It's on Amazon, or you can get it from Angelico Press directly.
Perfect. Goes perfectly with the theme, living joy. So, tell me, what is the Bible, what are the saints, what does Catholic history say about alcohol, specifically about beer?
Well, you might think if you open up the Bible...
And feel free to pause to drink while we're talking.
Well, where is beer in the Bible? Is it even there? Well, you know, when you think of certain passages, even like related to John the Baptist, we're focused on him here in Advent, it says that he gave up wine and strong drink. But strong drink is not liquor. We didn't have that until the 1400s. It was actually something called shakar in Hebrew. Okay. And shakar was a barley-based drink. It wasn't made the way that we make beer today. You would actually take a barley loaf and let it soak, maybe with some fruit or honey. But that was actually offered by the Israelites in the daily sacrifice. So they literally were offering beer to God.
That's incredible. I had no idea. Literally the first time I heard that.
We've been robbed with that in the bad translations. Strong drink should be beer when you see that in the Bible.
That's awesome. So what does, tell me more about what does the Bible say? There's great quotes from the Bible. There's Psalms about beer, about wine, some good saint quotes about beer and how it's something to be celebrated, not just kept in place. Well,
as you said, you know, alcohol certainly can be misused. And the first time we see alcohol is actually in Noah's drunkenness. Okay. So it was a sign of the renewal of the earth, the making of wine. But later on in the Psalms, we see that wine has been given to gladden the heart of man. And so we really have to keep both of those things together. That yes, it can be misused, but on the other hand, this is something that should bring joy to our life. And as we saw with that offering of shakar, should be ordered towards the glory of God.
Wine gladdens the heart of man. Honestly, this is one of the things in my own personal life with alcohol. I love alcohol. I love the taste. I love a slight buzz. That's not wrong, is it?
No.
See, my love of it is actually part of what keeps my drinking in line. You know, I want to enjoy this good, this blessing that the Bible says is a blessing. I want to enjoy it without ruining it. I mean, one of the evils of alcoholism is that it ruins the ability to enjoy legitimate good. And Catholics have enjoyed this good throughout the history of the church. monks have perfected this good throughout the history of the church. Tell us a little about the history of the Catholic Church and the monasteries and their overlapping with, well, is this made in a monastery?
It is, yeah,
Okay.
in the Abbey of Scormont in Belgium.
That's incredible. So this is free advertisement for the monks of the Abbey of Scormont in Belgium. Chimay, from the Trappist, but that's a good life. These guys are like they're monks hanging out praying all day and making beer. Sorry, before you get to the monk thing, 720-650-0100 if you want to text your questions in. So 720-650-0100. Tell us about how we perfected this.
Well, that's actually where the title, the beer option, comes from. It's from the Benedict option. And so, Rod Dreher kind of said that in our current culture, we should look to the Benedictines as a model for building culture centered on God, centered on prayer. But it was actually the Benedictines who perfected brewing. So, unlike in the Bible where they were dropping those barley loaves into vats and just letting it ferment, the brewing process as we know it was developed in monasteries. Why?
Wow.
They weren't just brewing beer for the heck of it.
I'm going to stop on that for 1 second. The brewing process that we've come to know and love. We have a lot of people who love beer. Thank you. Thank you to the Trappists, to the Benedictines, to the monks throughout history, to so many literal saints who perfected this. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because after the fall of the Roman Empire in the West, culture was centered on the monasteries. And they were places of prayer, but also of learning, the first hospitals. But they were actually providing a lot of sustenance for the surrounding population. The sick would come there. Actually, people who were traveling, that's where we even get the word hostel, was from the word for stranger, that the monasteries had hostels and they had hospitals from hospitality. Wow. So they were brewing beer to provide that sustenance. And it was safer than drinking water because they were boiling it in that process. And then you had the alcohol there as well to preserve it and to kill germs. So they were giving it to the sick, they were giving it to the poor. And of course, they were drinking it for themselves as well. Yeah. And they realized that if you drank beer, you were healthier, gave you more nutrition than if you just drank water.
Wow. Healthier than water.
That's right.
I worked for a priest who was from Mallorca, Spain. And growing up as a little kid there, and this was an older guy, so he'd grown up in the 30s in Mallorca, Spain. Like there's no fresh water in Mallorca. So they would have these big things of wine. And he's like, he grew up drinking wine instead of water, which I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that experience of growing up. Were they sober? Like, there had to, like, were these little kids? They're all so well behaved.
Well, there was something called small beer.
Okay.
So if you were north of the grape line, right? So south of the grape line, they would be making wine, but if you couldn't grow the grapes, you would be making beer.
Okay.
And they would have small beer, and it was like 1 or 2% alcohol. So women and children would be drinking that, and even the monks, they had 3 different lines. It'd be X or XX for the next level, and then XXX for the strongest. Okay. And so, the X
Easter.
level would be like for kids or for the sick, and then the double X would be like for the guests of the monastery, and you can only imagine what the strongest one was for.
Oh, yeah.
It was for them, right? They served the best for their own meals, but it was integrated into just their normal diet. People didn't drink because, they wanted to get drunk or it was like this extreme event. It was just a normal part of their diet, and it was part of their nutrition. And it was also part of the celebration, right? And so I think when we look at drinking in the Middle Ages and as part of the monastery, it was part of festivity. They were drinking to give God glory. And even, the toast, in German it became Prost, but in Latin it was Prosit. And it was just a toast for health, Prosit. Right? So they were drinking to give God glory and just for their own health and well-being.
Wow. We need to reintroduce the 1% alcohol thing. So they knew how to ramp up and cool down the alcohol level, and they controlled that. That's a key thing. That's key with our relationship with anything with pleasure attached to it, right?
That's right. The virtue of temperance.
That's right. Yeah, it enables you to enjoy those pleasures without them taking over your whole life. We got a good question here. I once heard that there were monks that only drank beer and received the Eucharist during Lent. Do you know if that's true?
So
only beer, like no food, just a beer fast.
So that legend is from the Friars Minim. And if you look at the beer Pauliner, Pauliner is named after St. Francis Paola, who was the founder of the Friars Minim. And they did the Lenten fast all year long. And there was a papal representative, a cardinal, that came to him and said, I don't think that your fasting regimen is human. Your rule is not human. And he said, I know it isn't. And he reached into the fire and grabbed an ember. It isn't human.
Wow.
And he said, okay, your rule's approved. But that legend actually comes from those friars who were fasting the Lenten fast all year long. That means no food during the day and just one meal in the evening.
Wow.
And so they were actually brewing a stronger beer, kind of the double Bock up in Bavaria, to tide them over during their fasting because it would give them some nutrition. And so the legend is that they actually wouldn't eat anything, but the truth is that they would have that small meal at the end of the day and some beer to help them. Now, the legend also says that the Pope heard about that. He said,
so double Bock is a little stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
They had almost no food. You're starting to demystify how peaceful these monasteries were. It just it wasn't all grace.
These were the most severe of the monks, right? They were really fasting. But anyway, it kind of tided them over. But the Pope heard about that, and he said, what are these monks doing? So legend is that they sent them some beer over the Alps. It was sitting there in the sun and getting shaken up. And by the time it got to Rome and he tasted it, and he said, if they want to drink that and they're fasting, let them go ahead.
Wow. Okay. So we could say there's a spirituality of work, a spirituality of insert whatever human activity here, right? Because everything, in some sense, is drawn up into the spiritual when we're Catholics. That's what it's about. That's right. We make these false divisions between regular life and spiritual life. It's like I heard the analogy of a fish swimming through the ocean, asking the other fish, "Where's the ocean?" It's like you're in it. How would you sum up a spirituality of beer? You've obviously thought a whole lot about this.
So I say that we should drink in feasting, fasting, and friendship. And really, beer is a stand-in for anything. How do we use earthly things well? Like we can abuse even the best gifts that God has given us. For instance, our sexuality, right? And so I think feasting, fasting, and friendship, that we're drinking for the right reason. Yeah. Right? We're not drinking as an escape, to try to get away from our problems. We're drinking to give God glory. And so we think of like the Christmas season, for instance. It's when you would toast everyone's health and be part of our celebration. But in fasting, so we're at a time of Advent, and that was a penitential season in the past. It was supposed to be like Lent. We're getting ready for the big celebration. And so we have to keep things in check. And I think the church gives us these times of fasting so that we don't become too attached to things.
Do you drink during Advent?
I give up drinking often during Advent. And so,
I was going to today, actually.
Yeah. Sorry about that. And so, I think it's important that we do at certain times say, I'm not drinking now, whether it's Lent or Advent. I think those are great times for that. Yeah. And then in friendship, right? So we're not kind of going off in our corner, kind of drinking too much, once again, as an escape, but it's something that we do in friendship that brings us closer to other people rather than pulling us away from people.
That is a key thing. That if you find yourself drinking alone, that could be the first sign of a problem, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Wow. And now here's a key question. I find that there are times where I want to pull back on drinking or fast from drinking, but I'm a very social guy. I think one of the things that could lead to drinking problems is that almost every gathering you come to, there's alcohol involved. You come together to have a drink. There's blessings in that. There are blessings to it being a depressant, that it can lubricate a conversation and relax you in a legitimate way. You go too far, obviously the conversation is not intelligible. So that deprives you of the blessing you're going for, right? When you feel like I want to pull back on drinking, it's a Friday or it's Lent and I'm getting together with friends and everybody's got alcohol, are you able to just say, no, I'm not, what do you substitute for that beer on those nights? Does it become socially awkward for you, or do you just go along with it?
Well, people will tease me. They're like, hey, they alter the beer option. You're not drinking tonight? And I say, no. And actually, for me, it does become a moment of saying, hey, we need to sacrifice that. And, obviously I don't want to ruin the sacrifice that I'm making by, talking about it too much. But I think it is a good witness for people to see that. But, I'll tend to gravitate towards something else, just having a sparkling water or whatever. And I would say if I'm not drinking for the right reason, then I don't feel bad about it. Yeah. I know, okay, if it's time of Advent or during Lent, I'm able to just give that up, and I'm not, experience that tension.
Yeah, right. Do you drink? Do you often have a nightcap or a night beer? What's some people, what's the frequency that you think is normal for a drink? I know a lot of people who have something every single day.
Right.
It depends on the amount, but some people wonder how far is too far with drinking, just like with teenagers asking sexual questions. How far is too far?
Well, I am predominantly German. The Germans, we joke, have beer for breakfast. And I've seen that
Might
culture
be a problem.
Being over there. And so there are times.
Do they literally have beer for breakfast?
They do sometimes. Yes, it is true.
As a breakfast substitute.
Well, as a supplement,
Okay.
whatever. I mean, they're having their cereal and they have a little beer.
Or cereal with beer
exactly,
instead of milk.
But I'm also part Irish, and I've noticed even with some of my Irish family that we don't tend to tolerate alcohol as well. So I see that kind of both sides of it. And when I have times where I've had a drink every day, I've actually experienced that it makes it harder for me to actually have good time with my family, and I like to write in the evenings. I have a harder time writing. Yep. So I do tend to save it at this point for more of the special occasions.
Yeah.
So I know I've been on both sides of that, but I'd say at this point in my life, it's probably more rare.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that's a key thing you just pointed out. It's examining what it's doing to your spirit, to your mental focus and clarity. And as much as I love a drink at the end of the day, and there's been times where like every day I'll have a nightcap, not a real big one, not two. Then I could feel like things can become a problem. But while enjoying the legitimate blessing, I think of the blessing of my consciousness, not to sound new agey, of the sharpness of my focus, my ability to call up words like with the sharpness I had when I was a teenage kid. And if I'm having a daily nightcap, after a couple days, it's like the dial's going down a little, and then it becomes easy to say nah, because I'm not thinking about what I'm giving up. I'm thinking what I want is my energy level.
That's right.
And that's even better than having a nightcap. But for me, it's a constant interior gauging, right?
I think it's true. You have to have that examination, and not just with beer or wine, but with other things as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now there are some people who love it so much that they can't ever really enjoy it. I have a dear friend who's struggling right now. He's like, ever since he was a teenage kid, first time he drank, he's like, he passed out, and he just loved to drink and felt like it wasn't enough unless he passed out every time.
Wow.
Right? That's not the common experience of everybody.
And I think that's where when Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out.
Right.
And if you are feeling like alcohol is leading you in that direction, pluck it out.
Yeah.
I think that is part of the spirituality of drinking, is that you have to know when it is doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
So I think there is a way to approach it in the right context with, community and making sure that you're keeping it in check with fasting. But on the other hand, hey, if it's leading you in the wrong direction, pull back.
Right. And then I'd say to that person, like, yeah, of course you love it. You love your sight. But if your eye offends you, pluck it out.
That's right.
Great question here. This is a question of pure objectivity. What is the best beer, Jared? Specific a question for you. They didn't ask me.
Well, I did rank my 30 favorite beers in the book. And so one that is always ranked very high.
Which, again, the book is on Amazon.
Yes, that's right.
I'm holding this up again because this is cool. The beer option, all right? He's got his 30 top beers ranked, and the man knows what he's talking about. He recommended we bring this in today. It's one of the best beers I've ever had, by the way. Which number is this on the list?
This is number 3. So
it's high up, man. It's so good.
So Brewing in Catholic Culture Yesterday and Today, that's a subtitle, and that's what this is really about, right? Is that it's building up a Catholic culture through evangelization, through community, these kinds of things. And one of the ways that I've seen that is tasting some of these monastic beers. And a lot of the 30 on the list are monastic. That's why they have a Catholic connection, the ones that I chose. So it wasn't just 30 great beers, but 30 Catholic beers. So Vestvleteren, that's a Trappist beer from Belgium. They only sell it on site, but some people will resell it even though they don't want that. So you have to go over to Belgium to get it.
What a tortuous thing to find out. And this is number 1, I'm sure.
Number 1. Number 2 is Orval.
That's just mean of you to do that.
Yeah.
Because now I'll live with longing for something that I'm probably never going to have. Okay, so you got to go there.
You need to go there, for sure.
Yeah. Have you ever brought any home?
Yes.
Do you give it to Catholic evangelist friends?
It's all gone now.
Just asking for somebody.
Maybe in a future trip. I've led a pilgrimage to Belgium. We went to some of these monasteries.
I'm signed up for your next one. That's awesome.
So Orval's number 2, and they use some of the local wild yeast from Belgium in the brewing. And then number 3 is the Chimay Blue, which started out as a Christmas beer, but now they brew it year round. It's at 9%, so it's very substantial.
That's 9%?
Yeah.
That's like wine.
And so they actually use a kind of brewing candy in it to boost the alcohol. So they're adding additional sugar that then gets converted into alcohol.
Wow.
And so it has a very rich flavor.
Yeah,
And
I'm glad you told me that.
It's
I was about to be
very
like, yeah, it's 4%. I could just drink that easily.
It's sweet and it's malty, and you get a kind of sense of even some stone fruit in it, some plum flavor.
What is stone fruit?
Fruit that has, the pits in it.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I got the plum. I definitely got the plum. Oh yeah.
You can see how it was a Christmas beer, right? And they don't put, some Christmas beers will actually put other flavorings in. They don't, other than the sugar that they use to enhance the fermentation. But
wow, you know what else I love about fine beers? You're not just chugging it back. One of the worst dreams I ever had, Jared, and most boring dreams. I was at a bar in this dream, okay, and there was a lot of kegs in front of me, taps. And it was all Michelob Ultra, all of it. And,
so it was a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. And I still to this day have not had that. Though I know Archbishop Chaput likes it. So I think that's why it came to my dream. And I said, I guess I'll have a Michelob Ultra. And I started drinking it and I thought, that's the worst beer I've ever had. And then I woke up. Dreams aren't quite as exciting after you're 40 as they were when you're a young man. But hey, but this is not just about the buzz. It tastes great.
It's an aesthetic experience. And what I mean by that is you really get a sense just of the great taste and the beauty of it, right? It's an aesthetic experience. I had a guy who went on the pilgrimage to Belgium, and he said, listen, I'm a Coors Light guy, and you're not going to convert me. And he had never had any beer like this. We actually went to this monastery. Yeah. And by the end of the trip, he said, okay, I take it back. I'm a convert. And he actually went out, and he was an apostle then. Because he went out and he started having tastings with his friends with some of these great monastic beers that we had tried over in Belgium.
That's awesome. Okay, so a beer can be a blessing when it's, again, decreases the stress level, helps you instantly go from 5th gear to 1st gear, be with friends, lubricate a conversation. Those things can connect you more with reality. I think that's when it's a blessing. It helps you connect a little more with reality. Can enhance the flavor of a steak, right? Let's talk a little about marijuana, which has a decisively different effect than helping you connect with reality. Well, obviously, too much beer disconnects you from reality and your consciousness and your faculties of reason, which is a problem. What's the difference between alcohol and pot? And we hear this argument a lot, especially in Colorado, right? Well, if beer's okay,
I've been in many arguments about it.
Yeah, if beer's okay, why not therefore marijuana?
Right. So I would say that beer is okay when it is consumed properly, and in that right context. I'd say the Catholic context of giving glory to God, promoting friendship, some of the things that you just mentioned. But I have a whole chapter on the book on the problem of drunkenness. That beer can become an escape. It can severely damage your health and your relationships. And I would say the same thing about getting high. And so the church says that when we are getting drunk or when we're getting high, it's actually a mortal sin because we're damaging our reason. That's where our dignity is based, that we're made in the image and likeness of God as free, rational beings. And when we impair that, that is a sin because we're damaging who we are and our ability to make free, rational decisions. So, there are medicinal qualities to the cannabis plant, right? And so if you can use it medicinally in a way that you're not using it as an escape, right? You're not getting high in a way that is damaging your reason and becoming something that is really taking away from your health and relationships and all the things we've been talking about, right? There are proper medical uses. I would say it's a fine line, of course, that some people say, well, I'm using it medically, but really they just want to get high. Right. And then that becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So I would say that the difference is that beer can be used in a moderate way. And if you're using marijuana or other drugs to get high, then that is not moderate. And it becomes a sin when it's an escape.
And a sin of grave matter, which if done with full knowledge, full freedom, is mortal sin, right?
That's right.
And because specifically, I love you mentioned human reason, right? Some people think about sins and big sins versus little sins. that's all flowing from arbitrary rules from God and from the church. And no, it actually comes from, this is the greatest human good, our ability to reason. It's a big deal because that's a great blessing, and you're trashing it.
Yeah. God wants us to be happy.
Yeah.
And so the commandments are pointing us on the right road to happiness and to communion with Him and other people. And so sin damages not only that communion with God and others, but it damages our own dignity.
Yes.
So drunkenness and getting high are not ways of truly being happy.
So what would you say to someone who says, but what if you just get a little high? Just wouldn't that be like getting buzzed, or is there something inherently different about getting high versus getting buzzed?
So it's very hard for me to be able to differentiate, right? You know, if you're getting high, that means that your reason is impaired, right? And, you know, St. Thomas, when you're talking about a buzz, he said it was okay to drink to hilarity, but once again, not to the point of losing our reason.
Yes.
Right? And so it's okay to get happy,
Yeah.
To feel good. And so what is that line when it comes to marijuana?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it possible to take such a small puff that maybe you would not lose your reason? Maybe. I don't know.
I've had people argue that with me.
But who does that?
Right.
Would be the question,
Who
right?
does
You know?
it?
That would be very rare.
Yeah. But there's also there's a difference between this is a depressant, and that's a psychotropic. And the inherent nature of a psychotropic, right? It's removing it from reality. You know, so
Right.
I think this is one of the things that's most harmful about pot. I know some friends who really struggled with marijuana use for many years, was that it is such a manageable psychotropic. It's not like heroin where it's like, you know, hey, there's a serious problem here. You can be getting stoned and have people not notice, and you could kid yourself into thinking everything's normal, but you're a little. You have this euphoria that just kicks you out of reality just enough. And there's no way to have your reason impaired, reason intact when you're a little bit out of reality. You know, and that's something this doesn't do to you.
Well, and I have a chapter in the book, Beer versus Marijuana, actually.
Yeah,
and so I give some of the data on that. And I would just put forward a big caveat that if you're under the age of 26 and your brain has not fully formed, then pot can permanently damage your brain. And I give some of that research, and I think even since I've written the book, just in the last few years, there's even more research that's come out.
Yeah.
So I would just say, if you're below the age of 26, do not use it at all. I don't recommend anyone to use it, by the way, but really avoid it. And that it's true, you know, once your brain is fully developed, it might have more short-term effects that could wear off, but it's long-term and permanent effects if your brain is not fully developed.
We could have a whole other show on that one. We probably should have you come back and talk in detail about that. It's a huge topic today. Got 2 minutes left. Do you microbrew?
I have, yeah. I'm not currently.
Have you been a failure at it, or has it been pretty good?
I think it turned out pretty well.
Okay.
And that's also, I think, a great community building event.
Yeah.
And it's a way of building culture in the home, right? That you can actually make something. And I think that's really important.
And what a cool something to make.
That's right.
Yeah. And any wrap-up thoughts for our audience about the spirituality of beer, how to use this blessing to, you know, become saint, insert your name here, rather than have it ruin you, or how to incorporate this in the holiday season into your life?
I would say that
way.
right now, in the context of the new evangelization, that we can use beer to evangelize, to draw people into conversation. When you think of like theology on tap or an Oktoberfest at a parish, or I've actually been to microbrewing, kind of home brewing events at a parish.
Yeah.
That is something that we can invite people to, and they might come to that where they wouldn't just show up at Mass or to another talk. So let's use beer to get into good conversation with people. Let's use it as a tool for evangelization.
Praise God. Like every blessing in life, you know, when you order it properly, when it's in relation with God, when you're examining your conscience, it can continue to be a great blessing, and not only for yourself at the end of a hard day of work and for your nutrition, but for evangelization. How cool is that? Dude, thank you so much for sharing all this with us, and for who
joy.
you are, and for just showing how all these things are taken up into Christ and made better by Him. It's not something you have to have, I drink a beer over here and I go to do the church thing over here. All this is brought up into God. So again, the beer option, get on Amazon. God bless you, man. Thanks again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Cheers.
Prosit.
Prosit.